tea ceremonies. Here the clash of katana. Age of warring states. Samurai, renowned for their swordsmanship, bravery, and unwavering sense of honor. Clad in armor and with countless tales told of them, both historical and fantastical alike, it's little wonder why they've sometimes been called the Knights of the East. Hello, I'm Adam the Fanatic, also known as Mario Fanatic 15, and today we're going to be looking at MicroProse's Sword of the Samurai, a much underrated gem from 1989. But before we do that, we're going to start at the modern day and work our way backwards through a little bit of history. MicroProse is most known for Sid Meier's Civilization, a series that's still going strong today with its 6th iteration being released in 2016 and 2 expansions being released in 2018 and 2019. Civilization is often considered the genre-defining title of 4X's and even turn-based strategy in general. Japan has perfect attendance, being playable not only in all 6 games of the main series, but also in both Call to Power and both Revolution spin-offs. On top of that, they're even a playable nation in the 2 tabletop versions that have unique nations which you can play as. And in every game since Civilization 3, the first in the series to use unique units for each nation, the samurai has appeared as a unique unit for the Japanese to utilize during the medieval era. However, before Civilization, there was another game MicroProse released that far more heavily drew upon the history of Japan. Starting in 1987, MicroProse released a trio of what they considered to be minigame games. Don't confuse these with Mario Party and like. The mini-games here are a little bit more involved and much more connected than that. The first of the trio was easily the most popular, Sid Meier's Pirates, which saw not 1 but 2 remakes in later years. The last of them was Sid Meier's Covert Action, which is generally considered to be the weakest of the trio, and I am inclined to agree there. Today we're going to be looking at Sword of the Samurai, which you may notice is not Sid Meier's Sword of the Samurai. That's because while he did contribute to the game, he was not the project lead. Rather, that honor would go to Lord Schick, who is today known for his work on Elder Scrolls Online. In Sword of the Samurai, you start by taking the role of a humble samurai retainer during the Sengoku, Japan's longest and bloodiest civil war. Over the course of the game, your goal is for your character, or their descendants, to take power during this turbulent era, eventually becoming a Hatamoto for his clan, then daimyo, and eventually taking control of the nation itself as shogun, replacing the collapsing Ashikaga shogunate. If you're familiar with the Shogun titles of the Total War series, then you're probably having a little bit of deja vu right now. Hold on to that thought, or return to it in the conclusion for comparison. As you start the game up, you'll be greeted with a pretty typical menu screen. You can start a new game, load a saved one, or view your high scores here. You'll also notice that there's a number of other options below that allow you to practice the individual minigames. I recommend skipping these and jumping straight into the actual campaign, especially if you're not adverse to losing or saving and reloading. But if you want to try them out a little and get used to them, that is an option. At the onset, you'll name your character. I of course recommend going with a Japanese name to fit the theme and flavor, but any name will do. Then choose a starting province. The primary purpose of this is to determine your starting stats. Suns represent honor, which allow you to recruit more samurai to your cause, and makes other samurai more likely to respect you. Fans represent generalship, which increase the skill with which your troops will fight on the battlefield. Swords represent swordsmanship, which is fairly self-explanatory. Finally, bushels represent land, which alongside honor will determine how large an army you can support. Once you finish making your character, you'll be given a short introduction and then be thrown into the role-playing section of the game. Here, you'll be able to recruit and train troops, acquire new lands, set out on adventures, be they alone or at the head of your army. You'll be able to marry a wife and have children, and having an heir to succeed you can be very important in this game, as the term extra man is quite literal here. If your current character dies, then you'll be able to continue playing as their heir. Otherwise, it's game over. Make no mistake, being a samurai is about far more than just being good with your sword. You'll certainly have to prove that, but you'll also have to tend to politicking as you appease your serfs and soldiers, perform deeds of honor to gain the favor of your lord, and attend tea ceremonies to bolster your relationships with other samurai families. You'll also have the option of doing things less honorably if you so choose. By entering a rival samurai's mansion, you can take one of their family members hostage or even attempt to assassinate them. Beware though, if you're caught in the act of such treachery, you'll be ordered to commit seppuku. Your family will live on, again allowing you to continue playing as your heir. Additionally, you may even attempt to directly assert power from your daimyo, though if you fail here, there are no second chances, as your entire family will be eradicated.
Dishonor! Dishonor on your whole family! Make a note of this. Dishonor on you! Dishonor on your cow!
In addition to the role-playing segments, the game is divided into 3 mini-games, all of which work together to form a coherent whole. If you've played Sid Meier's Pirates, you'll know exactly what I mean. With the various segments of naval combat, sword fighting, tactical combat, and dancing in the second remake, the flow is very similar here. Firstly, you have the duel minigame, where you'll be fighting in a one-on-one battle, clashing katanas with a foe, be it a rival samurai, a wandering ronin, or vile assassin. This is honestly the least interesting of the minigames, as the best tactic is to just rush up to your opponent from either side and spam a sideways slash as fast as you can. Even on higher difficulties, this will take down any foe with no real trouble. There is an option to parry, but it's really useless. This is definitely a case of the best defense is a good offense, and it's not even close. Secondly, you have the melee game. Here you'll be facing dozens of weaker enemies armed only with your bow and katana. Enemies die in a hit or two, but you'll have to move quickly to take them out efficiently. By default, you shoot arrows and automatically switch to your katana if an enemy gets too close to you. You'll find there's a few different map types here, each with randomized variations. Rice paddies, which have minimal cover, villages with a moderate amount, and finally castles, where you'll find yourself if you invade an enemy's manor for any reason, be it to rescue one of your family whom they've taken hostage, or to commit heinous acts of your own. Finally, you have the battle minigame. In this rudimentary real-time tactical engagement, your troops will clash with an enemy army. You'll select a formation, and if you're the attacker, they'll automatically move according to the path you've selected for them. At first, you'll only have access to a handful of soldiers armed with katana, but as your forces grow, you'll gain access to archers, horsemen, and eventually even ashigaru riflemen. I know, I am not ignoring the elephant in the room. I will be comparing this to Total War Shogun. Just a little bit longer, please. On the downside, you can't experiment with different army compositions. What you have with you is determined solely by the size of your army. On the other hand, it is quite satisfying as you'll slowly increase the size of your standing forces and diversify their armament as the game progresses. Typically, a given scenario will only present one minigame at a time, but this isn't always true. Sometimes they're strung together if it fits the narrative. For example, if you attempt to perform a direct coup against your lord, you'll first have to win a battle against their army. Once that's done, you immediately go into a melee fight to get through their bodyguards. And then finally, you have to defeat them personally in a duel to deliver the killing blow. Mind you, this is atypical of the game, and usually you'll have a chance to return to your manor and save after each adventure. As time goes on, if you've managed to distinguish yourself above your rivals, you'll succeed your Hatamoto, taking their place and aiming for grander goals. The second segment of the game is largely like the first, though at this point you'll be able to command much larger armies thanks to the increased land you'll control. Becoming daimyo is a bit trickier. While it certainly helps to have the highest honor among the Hatamoto when the daimyo dies, if a rival Hatamoto is powerful enough, they may contest your succession nonetheless. At this point, the other two Hatamoto will each side with one of the contenders. If you succeed here, you'll take place at the head of the clan as daimyo. From here, you'll be able to access the strategic map, ordering your army to conquer entire regions of Japan. You'll still be able to deal with smaller tasks if you wish, but at this point, you can send your own samurai lords to deal with the problems in your stead. Once you control 24 regions, including the capital of Kyoto, you'll be able to declare yourself shogun. At this point, your enemies will have one final opportunity to try and unseat you. If you're able to hold them off, you win the game, taking the mantle of shogun. You'll then be given a brief score screen depending on several factors, determining how long your dynasty lasts from its inception, potentially holding power until the samurai themselves dissolve. All in all, Sword of the Samurai is impressive in what it does. It's easy to get into, you can jump right into the game and understand most of what you're doing without even having to read the instructions. though there is a lengthy manual included, which includes not only detailed instructions on how to play, but also a fair bit of history on the subject, which I highly recommend reading for full flavor. And yet, despite this relative simplicity, it does quite a bit with what it has. The freedom you have to pursue different methods of bringing honor to your name, or dishonor to your foes, is quite robust for a game that's 3 decades old. Now for the question I've been avoiding until now. How does it compare to Total War, especially Shogun 2? And that's a fair question to ask. They both focus around the Sengoku and the collapse of the Ashikaga shogunate. They both have you playing as a samurai and attempting to take the seat of power for yourself. And the tactical battles especially are very similar in concept. Obviously, VGA graphics and Roland 32 sound effects aren't even going to be able to compare to a game from 2010. I won't waste your time trying to conflate the two. And for the area where they're most similar, the tactical army battles, it's no contest. Shogun 2 comes out on top by far. You have much greater variety in units, far more control over your army, and it's just a spectacle to look at those massive armies clashing, something that simply was not possible with 1989 technology. Strictly speaking of them as war games, Total War completely outclasses Sword of the Samurai. However, Sword of the Samurai is about more than just the clash of armies. Sword of the Samurai does something Shogun doesn't even attempt to do. It showcases the quest for Shogun at a personal scale. In Shogun, you never play as a samurai, you only play as a clan. You can play as the Takeda, but you're not playing as Shingen. You can play as the Oda, but you're not Nobunaga. You play as the Tokugawa, not as Ieyasu. Even in Napoleon, where the game is focused around a central historical figure, or in Three Kingdoms, where your commanders are superhuman forces of nature, Total War never makes you feel like you are the leader you're playing as. But Sword of the Samurai takes a very different approach. You're not just a vague, nebulous force that guides your clan. You are a samurai, charging at the head of your troops, vying for personal glory, with all the danger that entails. And in this way, Sword of the Samurai outdoes Shogun 2. It's really hard to think of another game like it. The closest comparison to make would be the aforementioned Sid Meier's Pirates and its remakes. But even then, the story these two games try to tell is so interwoven into their gameplay that the result is that they're radically different games, despite being built upon the same framework. This game most certainly isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea. It's archaic in many ways, but even so, I highly recommend it to anyone who loves a Sengoku theme. It's like a little bit of Total War, a touch of Samurai Warriors, and a hint of Nobunaga's ambition all rolled into one. And while the individual minigames may not be that impressive, the way they combine to tell a narrative and form a cohesive whole is amazing. And I still think it's worth playing, a solid piece of video game history that holds up quite well despite some outdated mechanics. Because of this, I rate Sword of the Samurai 7.7 out of 10. If you're interested in this title, please check the links in the description below. It's currently available on both GOG and Steam. If you have any questions, comments, or opposing points of view, please share them in the comments down below. Thank you, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Battle approaches. Sakura fall in the wind. Honor shall be mine. By the way, in addition to the 2 haiku that I've bookended this review with, I also hid one in the review itself. Can you find it?